What happens when a world-famous celebrity walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a friendly conversation about her career, business ventures, and life in the public eye, only to find herself at the center of an unexpected disagreement that slowly transforms the entire atmosphere of the show? What begins as a routine interview soon becomes one of the most talked-about moments of the season as strong opinions collide, audience reactions grow louder, and neither side appears willing to change their position. Make sure to subscribe to Talk Show Fallout, and like and comment for more talk show coverage. Paris Hilton was welcomed to the show with enthusiastic applause from the audience. The discussion started comfortably, with the hosts asking about her recent projects, family life, and how she has managed to reinvent herself over the years. Paris spoke confidently about learning from past experiences and focusing on the future rather than constantly revisiting old headlines. The audience responded warmly, and for several minutes the conversation moved along exactly as expected, with laughter, applause, and supportive comments from the panel. As the discussion continued, one of the hosts mentioned how public perception can sometimes be difficult to change, especially for people who have spent years in the spotlight. Paris agreed, explaining that many people form opinions based on a particular moment in time and never revisit those assumptions. She said that growth is something everyone experiences, regardless of fame, and that people should be judged not only by their past but also by who they become. The audience applauded, and several of the hosts nodded in agreement. Behar then shifted the discussion in a different direction. She pointed out that celebrities often receive opportunities that ordinary people do not and questioned whether public figures sometimes expect forgiveness more quickly than the average person. The audience reacted with a mixture of applause and murmurs. Paris listened carefully before responding that accountability is important for everyone, but so is recognizing genuine effort and personal growth. She emphasized that learning from mistakes should matter just as much as acknowledging them. Joy followed up by asking whether celebrity culture sometimes prioritizes image management over real change. The question immediately caught the attention of the audience. Paris paused briefly before answering that while image certainly plays a role in public life, it is unfair to assume that every positive change made by a public figure is simply a public relations strategy. She explained that many personal efforts happen away from cameras and headlines, making them invisible to most people. The audience responded with another round of applause. The conversation remained respectful, but viewers could sense a growing difference in perspective. Joy argued that public skepticism is understandable because audiences have seen countless examples of celebrities apologizing only after facing criticism. Paris acknowledged that skepticism is natural, but argued that people should still leave room for the possibility that someone has genuinely changed. Several audience members applauded loudly while others remained quiet, creating a noticeable divide in the room. Another host attempted to broaden the discussion by suggesting that society often struggles with balancing accountability and forgiveness. Paris agreed, saying that both are necessary and that one should not cancel out the other. Joy responded that accountability loses its meaning if people are too quick to move on from past actions. The audience reacted immediately, with applause coming from different sections of the studio, depending on which viewpoint they supported. As the exchange continued, Paris became more direct. She explained that she had spent years working on projects and causes that rarely receive media attention because controversy tends to generate more headlines than personal growth. She said that while criticism is part of being famous, it can become frustrating when people refuse to acknowledge positive changes, no matter how much effort is made. The audience applauded strongly, and several hosts appeared impressed by her response. Joy remained unconvinced and questioned whether public figures sometimes benefit from carefully controlling their narrative. Paris replied that everyone tells their own story, not just celebrities. She argued that sharing personal experiences should not automatically be dismissed as manipulation simply because someone is famous. The audience reacted with a louder round of applause, and the energy in the studio noticeably intensified as both women continued defending their positions. The moderator stepped in briefly to keep the discussion balanced, noting that the debate seemed to reflect a larger conversation happening throughout society. The audience agreed with applause. Paris smiled and said that people should always be allowed the opportunity to demonstrate growth. Joy answered that trust must be earned and that audiences have every right to ask difficult questions. Neither woman raised her voice, but the disagreement was becoming increasingly clear. By this point, the audience was fully engaged. Some applauded Paris whenever she spoke about growth and second chances, while others responded to Joy's arguments about accountability and public responsibility. The tension remained controlled, but it was obvious that the discussion had moved far beyond the light-hearted celebrity interview that many viewers had expected. As the segment approached a commercial break, the hosts exchanged looks, the audience buzzed with anticipation, and viewers at home could sense that the most intense part of the conversation was still yet to come. When the show returned from commercial break, the atmosphere in the studio felt noticeably different. What had started as a casual interview had evolved into a serious discussion that clearly had the audience invested. The applause welcoming the hosts back was loud, but there was also a sense of anticipation. Viewers could tell that the conversation between Paris Hilton and Joy Behar was far from over. Both women remained composed, but neither seemed interested in stepping away from the points they had been making before the break. The moderator smiled and attempted to ease the tension with a light comment about how quickly a simple interview can turn into a debate. The audience laughed, and even Paris and Joy shared brief smiles. Had evolved into a serious discussion that clearly had the audience invested. The applause welcoming the hosts back was loud, but there was also a sense of anticipation. Viewers could tell that the conversation between Paris Hilton and Joy Behar was far from over. Both women remained composed, but neither seemed interested in stepping away from the points they had been making before the break. The moderator smiled and attempted to ease the tension with a light comment about how quickly a simple interview can turn into a debate. The audience laughed, and even Paris and Joy shared brief smiles. However, the lighter moment lasted only a few seconds before the discussion returned to the topic that had captured everyone's attention. Joy explained that her questions were not meant as personal attacks, but rather reflections of concerns many viewers have about celebrity culture and influence. Paris responded calmly, saying she understood why people have questions about public figures. She added that criticism comes with visibility, and that she has accepted that reality for most of her life. However, she argued that some people become so focused on a person's past reputation that they ignore everything that comes afterward. According to Paris, growth should not be viewed as something suspicious simply because it happens in front of the public. Several audience members applauded while others remained silent. Joy nodded and acknowledged the point, but argued that public trust is difficult to rebuild once it has been lost. She explained that viewers often feel disconnected from celebrities because fame can create a perception that famous people live by different rules. The audience reacted positively to the observation, and a few people clapped loudly. Paris quickly responded that fame does not remove personal struggles, mistakes, or consequences. She said that public figures are often judged more harshly because every mistake becomes a headline. While she agreed that accountability matters, she believed people sometimes underestimate how much scrutiny celebrities face. The audience applauded, and one host commented that living under constant public attention would be difficult for anyone. Joy then challenged that idea by pointing out that fame also comes with significant advantages. She argued that while celebrities experience scrutiny, they also receive opportunities, resources, and platforms unavailable to most people. The audience reacted with another mixture of applause and murmurs. Paris acknowledged the advantages, but argued that privilege does not automatically erase the challenges that come with living under constant observation. The discussion continued becoming more detailed. Joy suggested that audiences have become increasingly skeptical because they have seen carefully managed public images collapse too many times. Paris answered that skepticism is healthy, but cynicism can become harmful when people assume every action is motivated by publicity. She explained that if people dismiss every effort at improvement as fake, then they create a situation where genuine change is impossible to recognize. The audience responded with one of the loudest applause breaks of the segment. Even some members of the panel appeared impressed by the argument. Joy listened carefully before responding that trust should be based on actions rather than words. Paris immediately agreed and said that actions are exactly what she hoped people would pay attention to rather than assumptions based on old stereotypes. One of the other hosts entered the conversation and asked whether social media has made forgiveness more difficult. The question sparked another strong reaction from the audience. Paris answered first, saying that social media often freezes people in a specific moment. She argued that mistakes can follow someone forever online, making it difficult for the public to recognize personal growth. According to Paris, people are frequently defined by their worst moments instead of their progress afterward. Joy partly agreed, but pointed out that social media also gives public figures the ability to shape their own narratives. She argued that celebrities now have direct access to audiences without relying on traditional media. Paris responded that while direct communication can be valuable, audiences are intelligent enough to decide for themselves what they believe. She said that having a platform does not guarantee trust. The audience applauded both viewpoints, showing how divided opinions had become. Some viewers clearly agreed with Joy's skepticism, while others seemed persuaded by Paris's emphasis on growth and second chances. The moderator noted that the audience reaction alone demonstrated how complicated the issue really is. As the conversation continued, Joy asked whether celebrities sometimes underestimate the influence they have on younger audiences. Paris answered that influence carries responsibility and that public figures should be aware of the messages they send. However, she added that people should not expect perfection from anyone. She argued that expecting flawless behavior from public figures creates unrealistic standards that nobody can consistently meet. The audience applauded loudly. Joy responded that the concern is not perfection but accountability. She explained that audiences are willing to forgive mistakes when they believe someone is being sincere. Paris replied that sincerity is often difficult to prove because people interpret the same actions in completely different ways. What one person sees as genuine growth, another person may view as image management. At this point, the audience became even more engaged. Several members could be seen nodding as both women spoke. The discussion remained respectful, but the disagreement was becoming increasingly direct. Neither side appeared willing to fully accept the other's perspective, and the tension was creating exactly the kind of live television moment that keeps viewers talking long after the show ends. The moderator eventually attempted to summarize the debate, suggesting that both women were really discussing the same issue from different angles. Paris agreed that accountability and growth should work together rather than compete with each other. Joy responded that accountability must always come first. The audience erupted into applause, with different sections supporting different viewpoints. As the segment approached another break, the energy in the studio was higher than ever. The audience was fully invested, the hosts were leaning forward in their chairs, and social media reactions were already beginning to appear on screens backstage. What had started as a discussion about public perception had become a larger debate about responsibility, forgiveness, trust, and whether society truly believes people can change. Everyone in the studio seemed aware that the conversation was building toward an even more intense exchange, and viewers at home had every reason to stay tuned for what would happen next. As the show returned from another commercial break, the audience welcomed the panel with loud applause, but the excitement in the room felt different now. The conversation had developed into one of the most engaging discussions of the day, and everyone seemed eager to hear what would happen next. The moderator thanked viewers for staying with the program and joked that the audience appeared more energized than ever. Laughter spread through the studio, but the focus quickly returned to the debate that had been building throughout the episode. Joy Behar picked up where the discussion had left off. She explained that her concerns were not specifically about Paris Hilton, but about celebrity culture as a whole. According to Joy, society often treats famous people differently than everyone else. She argued that public figures sometimes receive opportunities to rebuild their image that ordinary people rarely get. The audience reacted immediately, with applause coming from several sections of the studio. Paris listened carefully before responding. She said she understood why some people feel that way, but she believed the reality was more complicated. Fame may provide opportunities, she explained, but it also creates constant scrutiny. Every mistake becomes public, every decision is analyzed, and every statement is examined from multiple angles. She argued that while celebrities may have advantages, they also face challenges that most people never experience. The audience applauded, and one of the co-hosts commented that both arguments seemed valid. The co-host suggested that perhaps the real issue was not fame itself, but how society chooses to respond to public mistakes. Paris agreed, and said that everyone deserves to be evaluated fairly. She emphasized that accountability should be based on facts and actions rather than assumptions about a person's intentions. Joy responded quickly, saying that intentions can be difficult to measure. According to her, audiences often judge public figures based on outcomes rather than promises. The audience nodded and applauded. Paris acknowledged the point, but explained that outcomes take time. She argued that if people demand immediate proof of change, They may overlook the gradual process through which real growth occurs. The discussion became more focused as both women attempted to explain their positions in greater detail. Joy argued that skepticism protects audiences from being misled. Paris replied that excessive skepticism can prevent people from recognizing positive change even when it is happening. The audience reacted strongly to both comments, creating a visible divide throughout the studio. One of the hosts then asked whether public perception has become more extreme in recent years. Paris answered first. She said that social media often encourages people to view situations in simple terms, with very little room for nuance. According to her, people are frequently pressured to choose sides immediately rather than take time to consider multiple perspectives. The audience applauded loudly. Joy agreed that social media has changed public discussions, but argued that increased transparency can also be beneficial. She said that audiences now have access to information they might never have seen in previous generations. Paris responded that information is valuable, but context is equally important. She explained that individual moments can sometimes be misunderstood when separated from the broader story. The audience reacted with another wave of applause. The moderator observed that the discussion had become less about celebrities and more about how society handles disagreement in general. Several audience members cheered at that observation. Paris smiled and said that she thought many people were tired of conversations where everyone is expected to completely agree. Joy answered that disagreement itself is not the problem. She believed the real challenge was determining how much weight should be given to public accountability. Paris agreed that accountability matters, but repeated that growth deserves recognition as well. Neither woman appeared angry, but the determination in their responses made it clear that neither intended to back away from her position. The audience continued reacting enthusiastically. Every statement seemed to receive either applause or murmurs of agreement from different sections of the crowd. The hosts exchanged glances as they watched the audience become increasingly involved in the discussion. It was obvious that viewers connected with the topic because it extended far beyond celebrity culture. At one point, Joy asked whether public figures sometimes become frustrated when audiences refuse to see them the way they see themselves. Paris laughed briefly and admitted that it can happen. She explained that everyone wants to be understood, regardless of whether they are famous. According to Paris, the frustration comes when people decide who you are before listening to anything you have to say. The audience applauded strongly. Joy responded by saying that audiences often feel frustrated for similar reasons. She argued that viewers sometimes believe celebrities speak from positions of privilege without fully understanding the concerns of ordinary people. The audience reacted positively to her comment, and several members nodded in agreement. Paris acknowledged that perspective and said it was important for public figures to listen as much as they speak. However, she also argued that assumptions can exist on both sides. Just as some celebrities may misunderstand audiences, audiences can also make assumptions about celebrities based solely on reputation. The audience responded with another round of applause. The moderator stepped in again, noting that the conversation had become one of the most balanced debates the show had featured in weeks. The audience cheered. Rather than shouting or speaking over each other, both women were presenting thoughtful arguments, which seemed to make the disagreement even more compelling. Viewers could clearly see the contrast between their viewpoints without the discussion becoming hostile. As the segment continued, several audience members were invited to react. One audience member said she agreed with Joy that accountability should always come first. Another said she believed Paris made a strong case for recognizing personal growth. The divided reactions demonstrated exactly why the conversation had captured so much attention both inside and outside the studio. The hosts then began discussing some of the early reactions appearing online. According to producers monitoring social media, viewers were actively debating the discussion in real time. Some praised Joy for asking difficult questions, while others praised Paris for remaining calm and focused throughout the exchange. Hearing this only increased the audience's excitement. Paris smiled when told about the reactions and said that disagreement is healthy when people remain respectful. Joy agreed and added that meaningful conversations often happen when people challenge each other's assumptions. The audience applauded loudly, appreciating the fact that despite their differences, both women continued engaging with each other thoughtfully. As the final minutes of the segment approached, the moderator reminded everyone that the discussion would continue after one last break. The audience groaned playfully before laughing. The energy in the room was higher than at any point earlier in the show. Social media discussions were expanding, viewers at home were paying close attention, and both Paris and Joy appeared ready to continue defending their viewpoints. The debate had evolved into one of the most memorable conversations of the season, and everyone knew the final segment would determine how the audience ultimately remembered the exchange. As the show returned for its final segment, the atmosphere inside the studio was electric. The audience applauded loudly as the hosts settled back into their seats. Throughout the discussion, Paris Hilton and Joy Behar had presented very different perspectives, but neither had allowed the conversation to become personal. Instead, what began as a routine celebrity interview had transformed into a wider debate about accountability, public perception, second chances, and the challenges that come with life in the spotlight. The moderator thanked both women for continuing the conversation respectfully despite their disagreements. She noted that the audience had been reacting strongly throughout the entire show, and that viewers at home were clearly invested as well. Paris smiled and said she appreciated having the opportunity to discuss difficult topics openly rather than avoiding them. Joy agreed and said that meaningful conversations often require people to challenge each other's assumptions. The discussion then moved toward final thoughts. Joy explained that her position had never been about attacking any individual. Instead, she believed public figures carry significant influence and therefore should expect difficult questions. According to Joy, accountability remains essential because trust must be earned through actions over time. The audience applauded, and several members nodded in agreement. Paris responded by saying that she understood that responsibility comes with visibility. However, she emphasized that accountability and growth should not be viewed as opposing ideas. She argued that society benefits when people are encouraged to learn from mistakes and improve rather than being permanently defined by past actions. The audience erupted into applause, with many viewers clearly connecting with her message. One of the co-hosts observed that both arguments seemed to reflect concerns shared by many people watching at home. Some viewers prioritize accountability above all else, while others place greater emphasis on personal growth and redemption. The audience reacted positively, appreciating the balanced perspective. The discussion had become less about celebrities and more about broader questions affecting everyone. As the conversation drew closer to its conclusion, the moderator asked each woman whether there was any common ground between their positions. Joy thought for a moment before answering that she believed people can change. However, she also felt that change should be demonstrated consistently over time. The audience applauded. Paris agreed and said that consistency is exactly what growth requires. She explained that meaningful change is rarely immediate and often takes years to become visible. For the first time during the discussion, there appeared to be a moment of genuine agreement. The audience noticed it immediately and responded with one of the loudest applause breaks of the show. Even the hosts smiled as the tension that had defined much of the conversation finally began to ease. The moderator thanked both women for contributing to what had become one of the most engaging discussions the program had featured in recent memory. The audience stood and applauded as the segment came to an end. Paris and Joy shook hands, exchanged smiles, and continued speaking briefly while the cameras prepared to move toward the closing portion of the show. Although they had disagreed on several important points, both had remained committed to expressing their views respectfully. Once the episode ended, audience members could be heard discussing the debate as they left the studio. Some believed Joy had raised important questions about public responsibility and accountability. Others felt Paris had made a compelling case for recognizing growth and allowing people to move beyond old perceptions. The divided reactions reflected exactly why the discussion had captured so much attention throughout the broadcast. The conversation quickly spread across social media. Clips from the exchange began circulating online, attracting thousands of comments within hours. Some viewers praised Joy for asking questions they felt needed to be addressed. Others applauded Paris for remaining calm under pressure and articulating her perspective clearly. Many viewers commented that the debate stood out because it remained focused on ideas rather than personal attacks. Online discussions continued throughout the day. Supporters of both viewpoints shared clips, quotes, and reactions, creating an ongoing conversation well beyond the original broadcast. Entertainment commentators discussed the exchange, while viewers debated which arguments they found more persuasive. The fact that so many people continued talking about the discussion demonstrated how strongly it had resonated with audiences. Reports from people who attended the taping suggested that the atmosphere behind the scenes remained professional after the cameras stopped rolling. Members of the production team praised both women for handling a difficult conversation respectfully. According to audience members, many people continued discussing the issues raised during the debate long after leaving the studio. By the end of the week, the segment remained one of the most discussed moments associated with the program. Viewers continued sharing clips online, discussing the arguments and debating the larger questions raised during the conversation. Whether they agreed with Joy's emphasis on accountability or Paris's focus on growth and second chances, audiences seemed to appreciate the fact that both perspectives had been given room to be heard. The debate ultimately became memorable not because of hostility or personal conflict, but because it reflected a larger conversation taking place throughout society. Questions about trust, responsibility, forgiveness, and personal growth affect everyone, regardless of fame. That broader relevance helped transform a simple interview into a discussion that viewers continued talking about long after the show ended. As the final credits rolled and reactions continued pouring in online, one thing was clear. The conversation had left a lasting impression on viewers. Some agreed with Joy. Some agreed with Paris. Many found themselves somewhere in the middle. But almost everyone seemed to agree that it was the kind of discussion that encourages people to think, react, and engage with different perspectives. What do you think about the debate? Did you agree more with Joy's position on accountability, or with Paris's argument about growth and second chances? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Talk Show Fallout for more real talk show stories.